By putting control of sex at the heart of his religious message, Paul wrapped his own particular views on sexual behaviour in the moral authority of the creator of the universe, and he made it stick. Where's the temple of Aphrodite now? There's hardly a stone of it left. Thank you, St. Paul. Before Christianity, there'd been no such thing as a thought or feeling that needed a priest's forgiveness. The idea of sinfulness just did not exist. By the 4th century AD, the Church was claiming that if you confessed your sins to a priest, he could forgive them. The power that this conferred on the priest meant that from then on, they were going to control our attitudes to sex. People all over the world had once believed that the sensual, sexual power of the gods made the world alive. Sexual love was literally divine. The Church was determined to destroy that link, and along with it, paganism itself. And of course, the destruction of paganism meant that Christians would replace pagan priests at the centre of power. The antipathy to sex of the early Christian authorities was so complete, it even extended to the whole idea of marriage.
Marriage is a moral crime, more dreadful than any punishment or any death.
Marriage is a crime against God, a prostitution of the members of Christ.
It was certainly a novel approach. Sexual love had once linked mankind to divinity, but now in Christianity it did the opposite. Sex cut you off from the love of God. The Church imposed restrictions. Obviously only one partner, and not quite so obviously, only one position, man on top. No sex on holidays or fast days, or without your clothes on, or in church. Oh, and you mustn't enjoy it, of course. In the pagan world, there could be no such thing as sexual shame. Sex was what linked you and me to the divine. The rise to power of Christianity changed all that. Sex became the thing that cut you off from God. Disapproval of sex helped Christianity to define itself as distinct from paganism. And at the same time, it provided the priesthood with a means of control that was all-pervasive. In the Middle Ages, the Church dominated people's lives, just as it dominates this town of Montmorillon in central France. They didn't build churches like this just because they looked pretty. They were symbols of the power the Church exercised over every aspect of society. Obviously, the Church couldn't keep up as original opposition to marriage. It made more sense to take it over. But this wasn't that easy. You see, at the beginning of the Middle Ages, marriages weren't really religious ceremonies. They were more like business agreements between families, bringing their estates together. And small children would have their future partners chosen for them by their parents. So, in the 12th century, the Pope intervened in a rather surprising way. He played the incest card. He declared that marrying a relative was a sin, and not just a close relative, but any relative, to within 11 degrees of consanguinity. That means you couldn't marry anyone with whom you shared a great-great-great-great-great-grandparent without the Church's permission, which of course came at a price. Everyone suddenly discovered there was about 250,000 people in their neighbourhood whom they couldn't marry. And in a little town like Montmorillon, population maybe 500, that could be a bit of a problem. The Church may have taken over the business of marriage, but you still couldn't expect it to be exactly enthusiastic about sex. And it wasn't. Chastity was still the preferred relationship between the sexes, even in marriage. And marriage itself still remained outside the Church's official remit. It wasn't until the middle of the 16th century that the Church finally made the marriage oath into a sacrament that had to be performed by a priest. It had taken over 1,500 years for the church to allow marriage into its own ritual. And maybe that wasn't so surprising, because Christianity was a man's business in a man's world, and women were regarded as lesser human beings. Faulty and inferior, females were merely the property of men, like farm animals. It may come as a bit of a surprise to learn that European attitudes towards women improved somewhat as a result of its encounter with Islam. Now, I know that nowadays we tend to think of traditional Islam as repressive towards women, but back in the 12th century, things looked a bit different. The Islamic tradition is that women should be concealed but honoured, and honouring women was something that was decidedly not part of the medieval church's agenda. The encounter between the Crusaders, who came from the rather brutal and sexually repressed lands of Christendom, with the exotic and romantic courts of Islam, changed Europe more than it changed the Middle East. One of the greatest sexual revolutions in history took place in this actual hall. For hundreds of years, the church had been reinforcing the stereotype of the sinful Eve, a woman as inferior and subordinate to men. But here in Poitiers, in France, there was one woman who thought this had gone on for long enough, at least as far as she was concerned. Her name was Eleanor. Eleanor of Aquitaine. Eleanor was a very feisty lady. She was beautiful, charismatic, and sexy. But she was also married to the King of France, who wasn't. He was, well, Eleanor herself put it like this. She said, "I thought I'd married a man, but I find I've married a monk." They were not a happy couple. Eleanor clearly wanted more sex than Louis was offering, and she also wanted more power. And she realized that the two of them went together. She had a storming love affair with this chap, who was then the Duke of Normandy. His name was Henry. She had her marriage to Louis annulled, on the grounds of incest, of course, and married him. The following year, Henry made himself King of England and Eleanor Queen. And this is the palace the two of them built here in Poitiers. In it, Eleanor established an entirely new kind of court. She called it the Court of Love. Eleanor was trying to turn the tide of Christian anti-feminism. In her court, women were not just the equal of men, women ruled. They became unattainable objects of adoration, desired, fought over, longed for, but always just out of reach. And this suited Eleanor down to the ground. You see, she enjoyed surrounding herself with handsome young knights who flirted with her, but at a safe distance. After all, she was a married woman, and her husband Henry was not a pussycat. The language they spoke was descended from what the Romans spoke. It was the Romans' language, or Romance.
Sweet. You like it, so you're putting a ring on it. But have you ever wondered why we put diamond rings on things we like at all?
Oh God, you're gonna tell us the awful truth about engagement rings, aren't you?
Yeah, I am.
Cornering the world's supply of diamonds was a stunning achievement. No less extraordinary was the cartel's success in creating a demand for its huge stockpile of diamonds.
Who am I? The eternal gift of love between man and woman. I am a diamond. I am forever.
The De Beers campaign is probably one of the most successful campaigns. I mean, measured in terms of the growth in the market. In the 1930s, they were selling a rather insignificant amount of diamonds in America. By the early 80s, they were selling close to $2 billion worth.
De Beers first targeted American consumers through the movies.
And they opened a Hollywood office. And in the Hollywood office, they would give out diamonds to producers in return for them putting the diamonds in the film in a way that was considered very favorable. Now, what was considered favorable was very simple. Surprise. If a woman was brought in on the decision, she might have a lot of ideas of what she wanted. So what they wanted to do is create the idea that the man had to surprise the woman and present her with a diamond.
And now for the important
question I wanted to ask you.
Well, it's about time. I'm dying of curiosity.
You know I'm madly in love with you. I want you to marry me, Lily. You're in love with me, too, aren't you?
Well, if I'm not, then I'm afraid I don't know what love is.
Here's your engagement present, darling.
Oh, Jeffrey, it's beautiful.
Well, that's Milo.
Milo?
Yes, he's wondering what's taking us so long.
Wouldn't he be surprised if he knew?
I doubt if he'd be surprised at anything.
Not only are we talking about what is a familiar process today of planting products in films, when we've all heard of the product endorsements and that sort of thing, but we're talking about Hollywood in its golden age, where entire movies were created. They identified the biggest stars, actresses of that period, and they never appeared in public without their De Beers diamonds.
Claudette Colbert and Merle Oberon were given special scenes to show off their De Beers diamonds. Diamonds Are Dangerous was conveniently retitled Adventure in Diamonds. But De Beers aimed even higher than Hollywood.
The British royal family was another idea of what, in the American mind, represented the ultimate in how you should behave and how you should behave aristocratically and well. And of course, the British royal family was more than willing to go along because diamonds came from British colonies.
From this, the largest man-made hole in the world, over 100 million pounds worth of diamonds have been recovered. In the De Beers sorting room, 3 million pounds worth of rough diamonds were on view.
The royal family was lobbied heavily and successfully so that the English royalty, Queen Elizabeth, started wearing diamonds, and she basically left all of her other gems off. That's a tremendous coup for a public relations agent to get the royal family to essentially become sales agents.
Caskets made of Kimberley blue ground, embossed with coronets, contained a 6-carat stone for Princess Elizabeth and a 4.5-carat diamond for Princess Margaret.
We must travel back in time 1 billion years to witness its birth.
De Beers advertising set its diamonds in worlds of glamour and royalty. But its best-known slogan arose out of the fear that sales would be undercut if people began putting second-hand jewelry on the market.
It is rare.
So they had to create the idea that you should never sell a diamond, even though its value would only increase. And secondly, that people should store and hoard these diamonds. So the whole idea that a diamond is forever is really their desperate hope that people will hold diamonds forever.
It is love, and its only promise is forever.
We're planning to attract your customer by building on our Rites of Passage program.
In its message to dealers, De Beers reveals its key marketing strategy is to convince consumers to buy diamonds for every romantic milestone.
Let's start with your bread and butter, the support behind the Rites of Passage, the diamond engagement ring, diamond anniversary band, and the 25th anniversary diamond. Our goal is to make diamonds a cultural imperative for all these important occasions in a woman's life. That's why we are continuing to support these segments, so that newer products like the Diamond Anniversary Band and the 25th Anniversary Diamond will become as obligatory as the Diamond Engagement Ring, bringing your customers back again and again.
Nobody's aware that diamonds and all the associations we have with diamonds is a product of a marketing strategy. It's completely invisible, transparent. If you measure it in terms of how all the myths associated with this advertising campaign have been deeply inculcated in people, it's reached deeply into the popular imagination. This is probably the most successful campaign in history.
That's what we're here for, to respond to your requests and to help you sell more diamonds.